people, when they think of designing the built environment, they think of it in terms of function, form, budget, and over the last few years, sustainability and the environmental impact. But in fact, there's even more to think about. And so today we're going to look at design from a completely different perspective. So 70% of our health and longevity is determined by our health behaviors and our physical environment. And therefore, as interior designers, we need to be cognizant of the impact our designs might have on the health or behaviors of the occupants in our spaces. And over the last 30 years, there's been buckets of research carried out that has measured the levels of the positive and the negative impacts that our built environment has on our health and well-being. And we're going to look at how we can use this information and the science behind it to design healthy spaces that can enhance how we feel and how we behave in a space. So we have a number of design tools at our disposal. So there's biophilic design, we've wabi-sabi, we've huga, we've nudge or neuroarchitecture, and active design. And we also got to consider things like IAQ, which is interior air quality. And then there are building standards that we can use also to guide us. These design tools, all of these design tools, when used correctly to design interior spaces, can help reduce stress levels, improve performance and concentration, can help us sleep better so that our immune system stays strong. And they can also help synchronize our circadian rhythms so that our bodies function at an optimal level. So I'm going to start off with biophilic design. And so what is it? So in a nutshell, biophilic design is all about engaging the senses. You should go into a space and go, ah. We spend about 90% of our time or our lives indoors. We're cut off from the natural systems that we evolved from. So it's no surprise that the primitive parts of our brain crave a reconnection with nature. Biophilic interior design aims at creating a connection with nature in our man-made environments. And it has proven benefits, as I mentioned before, but these also include reducing anxiety and promoting productivity. It's more than just bringing the outside in, though. It's not about potted plants. It's about nature in all its guises, including natural light, the air we breathe, views on nature, plants, obviously, natural materials, textures, and patterns. So the biophilia hypothesis was first penned by Edward O. Wilson in 1984, and he defined biophilia as the innate urge to affiliate with other forms of life. Biophilic design, on the other hand, was championed by a guy called Stephen Keller, and he was a professor at Yale and wrote numerous books and articles on the subject. But it's not new. Tomb paintings in ancient Egypt and remains in Pompeii substantiated that people brought plants into their homes. And the Knights of Malta, the religious order who were famous for their healing and their hospitals, believed that gardens were an essential support for the healing process. And their very beautiful hospital in Valletta, Malta, was designed in such a way that the beds were facing out onto the orange groves. They were also interesting. They also used silver platters and goblets because they had antimicrobial qualities, and they also had en-suites per patient so that they would avoid cross-contamination. So I'm going to show you a short video where the pioneers of biophilic design will share their views on what biophilic design means. And these include Stephen Keller, I mentioned before, Edward Wilson, then you've Judith Heerwagen, you've Tim Beatley, and Claire Cooper Marcus. And so, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, this video is about 3 minutes. Is it showing at your end?
I think beauty is our word for the perfection of those qualities of environment that have contributed the most to human survival.
Great architects have intuitively sensed these things without probably even articulating or being able to articulate why they did what they did. It just seemed right.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
If you look at it in terms of its negative, if we're deprived of the opportunity to affiliate with nature, it also affects us. If we were in a room that had no windows, that had just artificial light and processed air, basically we wouldn't want to be there for very long. And if we were there for very long, if somehow you couldn't escape from that room, you would start to have a kind of a sensory deprivation.
We tend to think of cities and nature as being these kind of polar opposites, when in fact we need to think about the concept of the city as being more like a garden, full of nature, bountiful.
If you look at sustainability, it really is what impact does people and their behaviors have on the natural environment. And biophilia turns that on its head and says, what impact does nature have on us?
We grow as children by interacting with nature and learning about the world and ourselves, and we cut that off. We are limiting a child's development.
We are a technology company trying to lead the way in ways to innovate and attract the best talent in the world. Creating a workplace that has some of these biophilic attributes undoubtedly helps us do that more successfully. And that's with business.
My message to architects would be that if they do their job well, then they really are partners with the doctors and the nurses who do the healing.
Biophilic design is thus about creating good habitat for people in a modern built environment that satisfies their need for beneficial contact with the natural world. Environmental degradation and alienation from nature are not inevitable consequences of modern life, but rather failures in how we have deliberately chosen to design our buildings and our cities. We designed ourselves into this predicament, and we can design ourselves out of it with the help of biophilic design.
Is that okay? Could you hear it okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, grand. Could you see the video okay? Could you hear it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Good. All right.
Okay, brilliant. So, biophilic design. First of all, I'm going to give you some of the evidence behind it before we start looking at, you know, how it can be applied into spaces. So, basically, Ulrich's 1984 study was sort of the key start of all of this. And what Ulrich did, Roger Ulrich, is he noticed that patients who were having their gallbladders removed in a hospital, that those were on one side of the corridor were rooms out onto nature, and on the other side of the corridor were looking out onto a concrete wall. And he realized the ones on the nature side, let's say, were needing less pain meds and were leaving hospital about a day early. Now he ran this study for 9 years, and it's been replicated numerous times by other researchers with similar results. So they realized that nature had a restorative healing impact on patients. And then this guy Kaplan came along, and he posited what's called the attention restoration theory in 1989. And this suggested that mental fatigue and concentration could be improved by time spent or looking at nature. And in other words, that there was an increase in performance. So then they started to look quite seriously at whether nature views and nature indoors might have an impact on office workers and productivity. And so they found that this was true. They discovered there were increased levels of well-being by 15%, productivity increased by 6%, creativity by 15%. They also did tests and discovered that increased performance of 10 to 25% was evident on tests of mental function and memory recall. And then a huge thing, they noticed that absenteeism was reduced by 15%. So to put this into perspective, on average, the fixed costs for a large corporation on a business, on a building, would be 8.9% is spent on rent or mortgage. About 0.8% is spent on your energy costs, your heat and your light, air conditioning and so on. And 90.3% is spent on your people, salaries and so on. And green building design, so sustainable building, everything we've been hearing about over the last couple of years, is a $5 trillion market. It's all about reducing energy, reducing waste, $5 trillion market, and it only relates to 0.8% of a business operational costs. To biophilic and wellness design relates to 90%, over 90%. So done right, this can have a huge impact on the bottom line of any business. And just to give you some numbers of the value of the real estate market, the global wellness real estate market was valued in 2021 at $275 billion. And the global wellness economy is currently worth about $4.4 trillion, and expected to almost double by 2025 to 7 trillion. So it's a vast market, and people are sitting up and looking at this and going, right, there's definitely, you know, there's a lot here. We need to consider it. So the Biophilic, so Terrapin Bright Green are a sustainability consulting firm, and they built a blueprint for designers to work from based on what they described as the 14 patterns of biophilic design in 2014. Now, Stephen Kellert, who did the video earlier, had already published his first book on the theory, science, and practice of bringing buildings to life, as he called it, in 2008. And Terrapin Green built on this. And they split the 14 patterns of biophilic design into 3 sections. They're nature in the space, natural analogues, and nature of the space. And so nature in the space refers to the incorporation of plants, water, air, and animals into the built environment. And there are 7 patterns in this section. And research on having nature in the space has been shown to reduce stress and heart rate, lower blood pressure, increase well-being and productivity, positively impact their circadian systems, improve concentration and memory, improve mental engagement and attentiveness, and positively impacting on attitude and overall happiness. So the first pattern is visual connection with nature. And in other words, this is about seeing nature whilst indoors. And examples are orientating a room to benefit from a view of nature, or hanging artwork, or using video depicting nature scenes, using a lot of houseplants. NASA recommends 1 per square meter, or even installing an aquarium or a green wall. And pattern number 2 is a non-visual connection with nature. And this pattern is about stimulating all our other senses, for example, smell and touch and sound. And examples would be using textured materials, like stone and brick, wood, fur, using essential oil diffusers. Dr. Quing Lee, who's the father of forest medicine, would recommend pine oil. So he's a really interesting guy. You should check him out. Listening to natural soundtracks. Spotify has a good selection of these. And allowing animals or pets come to work. A crackling fire is another example. Lovely sound, heat, movement. And then the third pattern is non-rhythmic sensory stimuli. And this pattern is about creating random movement. It produces, funnily enough, one of the strongest biophilic reactions that we have. Because in nature, we hear random bird song, or we feel a breeze across our face, or, you know, we hear water babbling or insects flying around. So this can be done, sometimes needs a bit of tech actually to replicate this, but in principle, billowing fabrics or screen materials that move and glisten with light or breezes, moving images of rippling water, shadows and dappled light that change with the movement of time, nature sounds broadcasted at unpredictable intervals, mechanically released plant oils. Thermal and airflow variabilities. This is about creating a natural draft, about bringing in fresh air and ensuring cross ventilation if possible. And this can be done either through operable windows or mechanical ventilation. It also allows people to have an individual control to adjust the heating, because we all function at different thermal comfort levels. So having individual controls is very important in this. You're looking at opening and closing window shades, so working shades that manage the heat coming in as well as glare and light coming in, and managing solar heat gain. So this is using a mixture of building materials that absorb and emit the heat from the sun at different times and at different rates. So next one is presence of water. This is not always easy to install a water feature within earshot. So artwork and digital sounds are great replicators for this pattern, but obvious ones are an aquarium or a water wall or a fountain, or as I mentioned, imagery art. We've got dynamic and diffuse light. So you may already be familiar with circadian lighting. This is huge in contemporary office design, and this emits a white or bluey light during the morning, replication of the type of sunlight we have at that time, and then slowly changes to warmer tones in the afternoon. Sometimes you might get a boost of a blue coal light at around 4ish, just give people like a boost, it's like a cup of coffee really. I also want to look at daylight from multiple angles, you know, so we can create shadows and movement, and you want to be using daylight preserving window treatments. So although you need to cut out the glare, sometimes you still want to be able to get natural daylight into your spaces. In schools, for example, you want to maintain daylight and views, if possible, throughout the school day for at least 75% of class time. We also want to look at layered lighting schemes in this pattern. So you might use numerous light sources together. You want ambient, diffuse lighting, maybe on the walls and ceiling, task, personal lighting at your desks, accent lighting, you know, to highlight something of visual interest. And again, having a personal user dimming control system, again, to personalize the lighting is also very important. There's actually quite nice work been done with prisms and crystals and light shelves as well that can be used to refract light or create dappled lighting effects. Light shelves are very useful. I don't know if you know them, that they're a shelf kind of across a high level of a window. They protect the people sitting close to the window from glare, but equally then they allow light to go in to penetrate deeper into the space. So what do we got here? And then connection, the last one, connection with natural systems. This describes an awareness and appreciation of natural change. For example, the changing seasons or the time of the day or weather conditions changing and so on. And you would use natural patterns in this pattern, like from geology, like fossils or crystals. Natural life cycles would be plants, you know, they live and then they die. You want to use materials that will naturally patinate, leather, stone, copper, wood, bronze, you know, and your circadian lighting system would be part of this pattern as well, because as it changed, you would have it simulating the light at the time of day. So that is nature in the space. Then we have the second group of them. This is natural analogues, and these are one step away from true nature. They're materials and patterns really that evoke nature. There's 3 patterns in this section. Using natural analogues in interiors have been shown to positively impact on perceptual and physiological stress responses, improve creative performance, decrease blood pressure, and improve comfort. So first pattern here is biomorphic forms and patterns. These are shapes that occur naturally in nature. And it's not a new pattern. In Art Nouveau in the late 19th century, it was all about biomorphic patterns. And examples of this are the balustrade and mosaics mimicking plant tendrils. You know, up here, you can see the picture here on the left-hand side. This is Victor Horta's Tassel Hotel in Belgium, which was done in 1893. Another guy you might know, Antoni Gaudi in Barcelona. He was around the same sort of time. You might know his building Casa Mila, beautiful wavy balconies in central Barcelona. And then we have 2 things. The Fibonacci sequence, I don't know, you may or may not have come across it. It's a natural numeric sequence. It's absolutely mental, but it can be found in the pines of a cone, in petals of a flower, and it's well worth having a little look into it, Fibonacci sequence. And fractals, actually we respond at a very emotional base level to fractals, and fractals are patterns that repeat at different scales. Like snowflakes, you know, small branches of a tree replicating the larger pattern of the tree. Ferns are another great example. The little small leaves replicate the kind of the big leaves. Waves in the sea is a dynamic and moving fractal. And you might use these patterns. Oh, sorry, I've managed to jump a slide here. We go back there. Okay. How would you use these patterns? You would use these by, well, there are fabrics that are designed with fractal patterns on them. You'd repeat textures or patterns in fabrics and carpets and wall finishes. Tiles, you might do it in the tile pattern or the tiling layout. You might do mosaics. Biomorphic detailing, you might use it in railings and banisters, stained glass, and metalwork, like the way Victor Horta's hotel. Biomorphic forms, this is furniture with organic rather than geometric shapes. Artwork showing examples from nature of the Fibonacci sequence, for example, pine cones, close-ups, or flower petals and waves and trees. You could look at structural columns shaped like trees, or fronds. Actually, the bottom right-hand side image here is Calatrava's Lambert Galleria in Toronto. And what he did was he mimicked the scale and ratio of the fronds, the leaf fronds, and used them as columns. On the bottom left image, actually, you have laser cut panels. This is the Weston Hotel, and this is a light feature that replicates the canopy of a tree, but also provides dapple light and shadows. And then we have the second pattern in this group is material connection with nature. And this is all about using a variety of natural materials and textiles. It's kind of self-explanatory, really. But what's interesting about this pattern is the effects can be quite significant. Studies have shown that if a room is finished in approximately 75% wood, so maybe 5 of the surfaces out of our 6 in a cube, that it positively impacts on our endocrine system. Our cortisol levels drop and reduce tension. So it could be a very good finish to use in a waiting room for a medical procedure, for example. But you may not want to use it in a workspace, you know, where we need to be thinking and creative all the time. And you would use to create this pattern natural wood grains, you know, leathers and stones and fossil textures and bamboo, rattan. An example of this on the top right hand side, you can see Cook Fox did this elevator lobby, and they clad it in leather, which is soft to the touch, and it is patina, so it's very calming. It also satisfies another feature we discussed earlier on with this connection with natural systems by having nature in the space, so leather in the space. What else might you use? You might use wall claddings, you might expose the wood, you might expose stonework, you might expose structural systems like having heavy timber beams and so on. And then the third pattern in this complexity and order, this is about using natural ratios and spatial hierarchies to keep things vibrant and interesting. Like, in other words, don't be bland. So if a tree is bigger than a daisy, so how would you implement this in this space? Where would you place your focal point? I mean, how would you add sensory layers? You might do this by using a diverse material palette. Your floor plan would have certain symmetries and balances, but it might be more based on organic layouts, so not cubes. You might have split heights. You want to draw the eye up like you would in a forest. You look up to the tree canopy above. You might use wallpaper and carpet designs for zoning of spaces, for wayfinding. You would use diverse plant selection. You might use complex plant oil fragrances. You might have auditory stimuli going on. You might have an exposed structure or ecoskeleton, or even you might expose like the HVAC system, or, you know, there's a number of different ways you can do this. And then the last section is nature of the space. And there are 4 patterns in this section. And these patterns refer to the way that humans respond psychologically and physiologically to different spatial configurations. So we have an innate preference for open spaces that provide broad vistas for surveillance and safety. Physiological research indicates that our body reacts most positively to savanna-like settings, you know, in Africa, which is low grass, clusters of shade trees, and expansive views. So having, funnily enough, a successful implementation of these 4 patterns have been shown to reduce boredom, reduce irritation and fatigue, reduce stress, and also to improve concentration, improve attention, and improve a sense of comfort. So prospect, this pattern, this focuses on having an unimpeded view over a distance, ideally over 6 meters, but over 30 meters is best. So a view from a window onto a natural landscape is an obvious one here. But if you can't do that, you could look at placing art at the end of a long corridor. So you want to draw the eye, and being able to see from one space into another space is also good, or you can use artwork. And planting, obviously, at over 6 meters away. Refuge, this one is about creating a safe haven which is stress-free and restorative. And it's about protection overhead and to one's back, and preferably on 3 sides. And this can be done by including a high back chair, a reading nook, a drop ceiling or baffles, booth seating, covered walkways, or even by simply lowering the lighting levels. Mystery, this one is all about creating a feeling of anticipation, and it compels you to investigate further, and can be recreated with dramatic shadows, using spotlights, translucent materials at windows and doors that kind of hint at what might be going on behind it. Curving edges that slowly reveal are more effective than sharp corners in drawing people through a space, so curved spaces. Peekaboo windows. These are windows that partially reveal what's going on behind them. And you might have music or sound or natural sounds coming on and off from an imperceptible source. You know, just confuses a bit. And then risk and peril. This is really an odd one. It's about giving an experience of risk or danger, whilst ultimately knowing that you're safe. And the reason being is the right amount of danger can heighten our dopamine levels, which leads to increased motivation and memory and problem-solving skills. So examples of this are a double height atrium with a balcony or a boardwalk, or sorry, a catwalk, infinity edges, passing under or over or through water, and actually an easy one, life-size photography of predatory or dangerous animals can be very effective. So that brings us sort of very quickly over the 14 patterns of biophilia. So I'm going to look at now a couple of the other tools that we have that we can also bring in. So wabi-sabi and hygge and biophilic design, they all focus on how we feel in a space, you know, calm or stressed or focused or cozy. Wabi-sabi is an ancient life philosophy rooted in Zen Buddhism, and it celebrates natural beauty, flaws and all. Loosely translated, wabi means simplicity and sabi means the beauty of age and wear. And it encourages us to focus on seeing things in their most authentic